The courtroom of Judge Frank Caprio was a realm of hushed anticipation, a space where the very air seemed to thicken with the unspoken weight of judgment and the quiet hope for fairness. Morning light, fractured by the ancient leaded glass of tall, arched windows, spilled onto the polished oak floorboards, laying down pale, anachronistic patterns that shimmered faintly. A deep, almost sacred silence prevailed, broken only by the barely perceptible hum of old ventilation systems and the distant, muffled cadence of city life. The scent of beeswax, a ghost of countless cleanings, mingled with the crisper, metallic tang of official documents and the subtle, simmering unease of human emotions held tightly in check. In the front row, a figure sat with an unyielding stillness, his sun-weathered face a testament to years spent under an unforgiving sky. Sergeant Elias, a man whose skin told stories without words, wore a modest yet impeccably clean service jacket, its practical fabric a stark contrast to the opulent silks and linens of the young man beside him. Elias's gaze was fixed forward, his good eye unwavering, but it was the silent space beside his body that spoke volumes. His left arm was absent, a visible void where muscle and bone once were, a sacrifice etched into the air itself. It was a space that young Arthur Almeida, heir to a fortune as vast as it was ill-gotten, pointedly ignored. Arthur, draped in a suit of Italian silk that shimmered with an almost liquid grace, exuded an aura of casual disdain. His perfectly coiffed hair caught the light, and a faint, mocking smile played on his lips, a nervous habit that barely masked a profound, almost aggressive boredom. He chewed gum with a slow, rhythmic insolence, his jaw working as if to masticate the very sanctity of the room. He didn't spare Elias a glance, his blue eyes, cold and calculating, darting instead to the ornate clock above the judge's bench, counting the seconds stolen from his undoubtedly more important life. What a waste of time, he thought, a familiar wave of irritation washing over him. Another minor inconvenience, another pathetic attempt to hold someone like me accountable. It's always about money, isn't it? And money I have in abundance. He was oblivious to the quiet dignity radiating from Elias, whose worn leather boots were planted firmly on the floor, testament to a different kind of strength, a resilience forged in hardship and duty. Arthur's internal monologue was a symphony of entitlement. A few thousand, maybe 10? Fine. It's a rounding error. Let the old man have his little speech, play his games. The world understands power. The world understands wealth. This little charade will be over, and I'll be back to my life, while these people wallow in theirs. He was unaware that the very room, though Judge Frank Caprio had yet to enter, already hummed with an impending moral reckoning. This chamber was not merely about fines or statutes. It was about the soul, and Arthur Almeida was about to discover that some debts could not be settled with a check. An absent arm, a sacrifice ignored, a sneering smile from an heir who never knew pain. The hushed reverence of the courthouse, thick with the scent of old paper and polished wood, dissolved as if a curtain had been torn away, replaced by the vivid, sun-drenched memory of a bustling morning at the Gathering Point coffee shop. The air, warm and alive, was a comforting blend of freshly brewed coffee and the savory aroma of just-baked cheese bread. Elias, a steaming mug cradled in his calloused hands, waited patiently in line, his gaze wandering idly. He'd just left a physical therapy session, and the slightly oversized flannel shirt brushed uncomfortably against his left shoulder, where the prosthesis, a constant, undeniable presence, made itself known beneath the fabric. It was then that Arthur, a coiled spring of impatience, deliberately bumped into him. Hot coffee sloshed over Elias's shirt, a dark stain blossoming instantly, and the prosthesis, now undeniably conspicuous, snagged Arthur's attention. "Watch where you're going, cripple," Arthur sneered, his laugh high-pitched and shrill, drawing the immediate, uncomfortable gaze of those nearby. The unmasked disdain in his eyes was a sharp, direct thrust. Elias, a man long accustomed to battling far greater adversities, felt the sudden, searing pain not in his flesh, but deep within his soul, a familiar ache of dismissal. "My arm is missing because I served this country, son," Elias responded, his voice thick with emotion yet firm. He met Arthur's gaze, unwilling to shrink. Arthur, however, offered not a flicker of remorse. A dismissive wave of his hand, a condescending smirk. "Ah yes, the old war trick. Want a medal? Or maybe some spare change?" The humiliation spread like wildfire, clinging to Elias, heavier than the onlooker's stares, hotter than the searing coffee. He felt the sharp, bitter sting of ingratitude and profound disrespect. Arthur, conversely, felt a surge of intoxicating power. To effortlessly diminish someone he perceived as inferior, to carve a notch in his own imagined superiority, was a thrill. His triumphant laughter echoed in the private chambers of his mind, a melody of his own making, celebrating a fleeting, hollow victory. 3. The triumphant laughter that had echoed in the private chambers of Arthur Almeida's mind was abruptly silenced by the heavy oak doors of the courtroom. As if on cue, a hush fell over the assembled few, the quiet punctuated only by the rhythmic, almost judgmental, tick-tock of the wall clock, a relentless march of seconds measuring out the impending confrontation. A wave of ancient wood, dust, and beeswax, a scent steeped in countless dramas and measured judgments, permeated the air, thick with anticipation. Into this solemn arena stepped Judge Frank Caprio. His dark judicial robe, a cascade of severe fabric, seemed to absorb the muted light of the room, adding an undeniable, almost palpable gravity to his presence. He moved with a quiet dignity, his gaze sweeping across the faces before him, not lingering, yet missing nothing. Arthur Almeida, now seated in the defendant's dock, had settled into a posture of practiced nonchalance. His expensive suit, tailored with a precision that bespoke vast sums, appeared almost too casual on him, a deliberate rejection of the formality of the court. He brought a piece of gum to his mouth, unwrapping it with deliberate slowness. The crinkle of the foil, a minor rebellion in the oppressive silence. He began to chew, the soft, rhythmic squelch of the gum against his teeth a barely audible yet undeniably defiant challenge to the authority that now held him captive. His eyes, devoid of genuine concern, drifted around the courtroom, darting from the high ceilings to the faded tapestries, searching for anything to alleviate his profound boredom, as if the entire proceeding were an irritating delay in his day. Judge Caprio, from his elevated bench, watched him. His expression remained serene, unreadable, yet his gaze was a penetrating force, stripping away the superficial layers of Arthur's composure. The faint, almost cloying sweetness of Arthur's exorbitantly priced cologne, a scent of manufactured luxury, hung heavy in the air around him, a stark contrast to the humble, almost imperceptible scent of worn fabric and honest toil that might have emanated from Sergeant Elias's uniform if he were closer. In the meticulously manicured landscape of Arthur's mind, the only pressing matter was the expediency with which this tiresome charade would conclude. "Just a good sum," he mused, a complacent smirk playing on his lips, "and everything will be resolved." He was utterly convinced that money was the universal key, capable of unlocking any door, even the formidable gates of justice. He remained blissfully unaware that Judge Caprio's discerning eyes saw far beyond the expensive suit, the designer cologne, and the feigned indifference, piercing straight through the brittle, gilded shell of arrogance that encased Arthur's very spirit. The judge was observing not just a defendant, but a soul in desperate need of a reckoning. 3. The quiet hum of the courtroom, an almost imperceptible murmur of ancient air conditioning and the distant city's pulse, settled around the proceedings. Judge Frank Caprio, his gaze unwavering, finally spoke. His voice a remarkable blend of gentleness and firm authority that seemed to absorb all other sounds. "Mr. Almeida," he began, his words not tethered to the specifics of the vehicular incident, but to a deeper, more profound undercurrent. "Have you ever paused to consider the true meaning of sacrifice? The incalculable price of a life dedicated to protecting others?" Arthur Almeida, perched on the defendant's bench, exhaled slowly, a faint, sweet menthol scent from his gum briefly permeating the air, clashing with the subtle, earthy aroma of old paper and polished wood. He shifted, a dismissive gesture that rustled the expensive fabric of his suit. "Judge, with all due respect, I believe the matter at hand concerns an unfortunate incident, a mere fender-bender, if you will. Sacrifice, I imagine, has its price, and I am fully prepared to cover any financial damages incurred." He smoothed the knot of his silk tie, an almost imperceptible act of defiance. In his mind, the court was a transactional space, and he was ready to pay his dues and move on. The judge, unmoved by the defendant's practiced nonchalance, continued, his voice steady as a deep river. "And what of the price of dignity, Mr. Almeida? The profound value of a limb lost, a future irrevocably altered, all in the name of the very freedom this country offers. Freedom that allows you to stand here today, unfettered, to express your opinions, however disrespectful they may be towards the sacrifices of others." A flicker of a smile played on Arthur's lips, a glint of challenge in his eyes. "Dignity, Judge, can often be quite effectively restored with adequate compensation. It's the law of the market, isn't it? Everything, after all, has its value." He chewed his gum with a rhythmic, almost insolent click, convinced that Judge Caprio was just another well-meaning but ultimately naive idealist, utterly disconnected from the pragmatic machinations of the real world. Yet, as Arthur spoke, Judge Caprio registered the unyielding inflexibility in his voice, the chilling, complete absence of genuine empathy. A knot of quiet determination tightened within the judge's chest. The moral cat-and-mouse game, he understood, had truly just begun. A quiet determination had indeed settled in Judge Frank Caprio's chest, a silent vow to peel back the layers of indifference that armored the man before him. The courtroom itself seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with unspoken tension, the subtle scent of old wood polish and apprehension hanging heavy. Only the soft, rhythmic hum of the ventilation system dared to break the profound stillness. Then a subtle shift. Judge Frank Caprio leaned forward, the faintest scrape of his worn leather chair against the polished floorboards echoing like a whisper in the hushed space. His eyes, which moments before had held the keen observation of a seasoned arbiter, now carried a profound weight, a glint of distant memory that brought a new, almost somber gravity to his gaze. His voice, when it came, was a touch deeper, a resonant chord that vibrated with a history only he knew, yet was about to share. "Mr. Almeida," Judge Frank Caprio began, each word meticulously placed. "Sergeant Elias served in Afghanistan. He was part of a brigade that, many years ago, rescued civilians and military personnel under heavy fire. One of the doctors who tended to the wounded in the field, losing his own life in that heroic rescue, was my brother, Lieutenant Dr. Thomas Caprio. A ripple of hushed murmurs, like a collective intake of breath, swept through the gallery. The revelation hung in the air, a sudden, unexpected current in the still waters of the courtroom. Arthur Almeida, whose face had been a mask of carefully constructed indifference, now betrayed a flicker of genuine confusion, a brief, disoriented blink. The steady, insolent rhythm of his gum chewing faltered, then ceased entirely, the motion arrested mid-cycle. "He saved lives, Mr. Almeida," Judge Frank Caprio continued, his voice unwavering, yet imbued with a quiet pain that was palpable. "But he also left an emptiness in my family, a scar that never truly closes. Just as Sergeant Elias carries his physical scar, a constant, aching reminder of his sacrifice and absence from his former life, I carry mine." Arthur's meticulously crafted armor of cynicism, forged from years of privilege and detachment, began to visibly crack. The arrogant smirk that had been a permanent fixture on his lips vanished, replaced by a sudden, stark pallor. His eyes, previously so dismissive, widened with a dawning comprehension, a horrific realization that punctured his carefully constructed bubble of invincibility. The small, almost imperceptible sound of the discarded gum falling from his slack jaw, hitting the old wooden floor with a soft, insignificant thud, became a profound symbol of his crumbling composure. He swallowed hard, a dry, rasping sound, the air suddenly feeling thin and scarce in his lungs. The figure of Judge Frank Caprio, once merely an embodiment of stern authority, now transformed in Arthur's perception into a man bearing a personal, searing wound, directly linked to the very sacrifice Arthur had so casually mocked. Arthur's meticulously built world, founded on the twin pillars of inherited wealth and emotional distance, reeled precariously. The raw, brutal reality of his word's impact, the unexpected, intimate connection to a seemingly distant judge's profound grief, pierced his ego like a shard of ice, a cold, sharp blade twisting in his gut. The moral cat-and-mouse game had indeed begun, but Arthur Almeida had just been caught in the most unexpected trap of all. 3. The air in the courtroom grew thick, heavy, with the revelation that made Arthur Almeida visibly shrink in his expensive suit. His eyes, once arrogant and dismissive, now fixed on Judge Frank Caprio with a raw mixture of fear and dawning comprehension. A tremor ran through him, a subtle shift from entitled bravado to something acutely vulnerable. "Your father, Mr. Almeida," Judge Frank Caprio continued, his voice resonating with an unyielding authority that filled every corner of the room, "is a man I know and respect. A Marine veteran who himself lost a brother in the Vietnam War. He has been informed of your deplorable conduct and, I believe, is profoundly disappointed." Arthur's breath hitched. The carefully constructed facade he wore, woven from family wealth and social standing, began to fray. "As of today," the judge's words cut through the silence like a scalpel, "all your credit accounts and access to family funds have been frozen. He wants you to learn the true value of work and respect without the cushion of your fortune." Arthur's face paled further, a bead of cold sweat tracing a path down his temple. His phone, an extension of his identity, vibrated insistently in his pocket, but he lacked the courage to look. The sepulchral silence from his family, the crushing absence of a financial savior, struck him like a physical blow. The faint, expensive scent of his cologne seemed to dissipate, replaced by the sharp, metallic tang of newly discovered fear. Who am I without it? A cold panic began to spread through his chest, an internal scream unheard by anyone else. Without Dad's money, without the status, what am I? The mask of superiority shattered, revealing a terrified, utterly empty young man. He felt naked, exposed, stripped bare of his only shield. Sergeant Elias's silent, serious gaze seemed to pierce his very soul, a mute testament to a pain Arthur had never had to bear, until now. 3. The air in the courtroom, thick with the scent of old paper and polished wood, seemed to hum with an unspoken tension as Judge Frank Caprio's gaze, both penetrating and profoundly compassionate, settled on Arthur Almeida. Arthur, still trembling, felt the weight of that look. "Mr. Almeida," the judge declared, his voice a low, resonant baritone that carried a gravity capable of piercing the very soul. "Your sentence will not be a monetary fine. For money, it is clear, has taught you nothing but how to obscure your flaws. Nor will it be imprisonment, for that would merely isolate you from the very society you desperately need to learn to respect." A profound silence descended, heavier than any gavel strike, filling every corner of the room, allowing the stark truth of his words to fully settle. He continued, "Your penalty will be 1 year of full-time community service at a veteran support center. You will spend your days alongside men and women who, like Sergeant Elias, have given pieces of themselves for this country. You will listen to their stories, learn to tie the laces of a man with a prosthetic limb, to serve a meal to someone whose world has gone dark. You will come to understand, not through abstract reason, but through raw, lived experience, what sacrifice, dignity, and honor truly mean. And each day, before beginning your work, you will offer a military salute to the first veteran you encounter. Not as an empty gesture, Mr. Almeida, but as an act of genuine respect and profound gratitude." The ardor in Judge Caprio's eyes was that of a devoted teacher seeking a profound transformation, not merely a punitive measure. Arthur, struck dumb, found no words to form. The image of his ego, now in shards at his feet, was agonizing. The notion of a year stripped of his gilded privileges, immersed in the stark realities of those he had so carelessly disdained, was utterly terrifying, a fear colder and sharper than any prison cell. Sergeant Elias, seated nearby, offered a subtle nod, a flicker of hard-won hope mingling with his characteristic resignation, a quiet acknowledgement of the judge's deep wisdom. 18 months later, the Veteran Support Center, a place Arthur once dismissed with disdain, now resonated with his transformation. The arrogant young man, feeling above others, had vanished. In his place stood a man with broader shoulders, eyes holding new depth, and hands calloused from service. The scent of brewing coffee, once a bitter reminder of humiliation, now offered comforting warmth and companionship. Arthur had learned to listen, to serve, to truly feel. He often assisted Sergeant Elias, helping him navigate, reading him the news. On a cold afternoon, Elias had quietly confided stories of fallen comrades, a past Arthur now grasped. On a sun-drenched porch, among veterans, Arthur spotted Elias. Their eyes met, a profound understanding passing. Arthur, his posture straight not from arrogance but purpose, brought his hand to his forehead in an impeccable military salute. It was heartfelt reverence, acknowledging courage and sacrifice he finally comprehended. Sergeant Elias, a gentle smile gracing his lips, returned the salute. Arthur felt the warm glow of reborn honor surge through his chest. He remembered Judge Frank Caprio's words, "True strength isn't in humiliating, but in elevating." Arthur, finally shorn of his toxic ego, was free to live a life of genuine purpose, a living testament to the restorative justice Judge Frank Caprio had carved into his soul.